watching a presentation on NFT marketplaces, but it's actually on how to start to run a successful NFT scam from broke to Lambo in 1 hour. So I started for like a little bit of a joke. One of my colleagues, Peter, he just dropped me a message saying, hey, I'm trying to punch your scams here. I thought it was a nice joke to start off with. Okay, this presentation is about NFTs and marketplace insights, and just the general lessons that were learned from a Web3 POC. One of our clients came to us and was looking at, crypto marketplaces, and it's a rather big client. So I thought for the innovation team, or the innovation center, just to look at NFTs, how they glue together, how a project would glue together. You see these marketplaces cropping up a lot. A lot of people offshore also looking into the crypto space and also collectibles, with NFTs. So I thought it was a good little place to start off with as a first project. So on today's agenda, I'm just going to talk about the ABCs of NFTs. I know a lot of people have read news about them, but I'm going to give you like an intuition on how it works and how it all glues together. It won't be super technical. It'll get a little technical, but it'll be just enough to get the ball rolling. To just give you like a solid foundation. I'm then going to step you through the project and what we actually built, and then just talk about some general insights, things that Google was a little bit misleading in the Web3 space. There's some stuff there that isn't as clear as I would have liked it to have been when we started the journey. And then we'll go through some shout outs, and then just take some questions and thoughts. Okay, so the ABCs of NFTs, how do they actually work? Okay, well, the first thing most people ask when they go search on Google is what does NFT stand for? And what an NFT stands for, it's a non-fungible token. Right? The next question that people talk about is, well, what on earth does fungible mean? And I had to go Google all these sorts of things. And fungible means it's a unit of value that is easily transferable. So it's a one-for-one comparison. So if I have 1 rand, all the 1 rands are equal, then I can swap and trade 1 rands. So the value is measurable, and we can just transfer it. It's equal. So 1 rand is equal to another 1 rand, and so on and so forth. And that's what fungible means. Non-fungible means that it's something that holds value, but they're not exactly tradable. So a house holds value, but even though a house might have the same specifications as another house, you can't just trade houses because there's different values associated with them for various other reasons. So it's something that stores value, but you can't necessarily transfer it. There's no like-for-like comparison. So same as artwork, artwork will hold value, but you can't transfer it, easily. It's not a like-for-like transfer. And that's what non-fungible means, right? Okay. And so this came perfectly off Google because I could not summarize it any better. So what is a non-fungible token? Well, it's a record on a blockchain, which is associated with a particular digital or physical asset. Now, when I read this the very first time, an NFT as a record, well, that's a little bit peculiar. We know NFT to be this. It's normally a picture that you see on OpenSea and that you can buy and sell, right? And you would be correct in understanding that, but this is actually what an NFT is. An NFT is just a number that gets stored on a blockchain that points to a CID, which I'll explain a little bit later. For this purposes, let's just say it's a URL, right? So that's it. It's a number that gets stored on a blockchain that points to a URL. And we'll break this down a little bit further as to what this actually means. Okay, so this is a smart contract, right? You'll generally have a smart contract that looks like this, and it'll follow there. You'll see there the ERC 721 standard, right? This is a standard that's defined by the industry, and a company like OpenZeppelin, it's actually created all the code and done everything such that you can literally, just use the protocol as is, and your code is good to go. So this is what a smart contract looks like, or part of a smart contract looks like. Okay, and as you can see over here, in the actual smart contract is a counter. It's just a number. Okay, and you'll take the current number, you'll increment it for the next time, and then you'll call this function called safe mint. And what normally happens is that you'll see the address over there, the to variable, will look something like this. And all we really do is we say, hey, this address over here, okay, has minted this number. So let's assume that the token ID is 0 for the very first time. And all we're saying is that, hey, this address owns the number 0, okay, for this particular contract on the blockchain, right? Then what we do is we'll say, hey, for this particular number, this is the URI, that URL you saw earlier. That's the URL that's associated with this particular token. Okay, so the number is just normally referred to as a token, and that's pretty much it, right? So yeah, you safe mint it, and then you just associate a URL to that particular token. The next question that most people started to ask when I went through this sort of journey, I was like, okay, cool. So it's just a number that gets saved on a blockchain. Well, what is this? And this over here is a CID. It's a content identifier, and I'll step into that a little bit more. And you would think that this over here is actually your image, right? So you would think, hey, cool. This number must point to an image, and this is the image that I own, right? And you'd almost be correct in saying that, but it's actually not, based on what you saw over here. It actually points to metadata. Okay, so the number actually points to metadata, and this metadata describes the image. So you'll see over here when we created the metadata for the marketplace for one of the images, you'll see that it's got a description, it's got an image, and that's the actual image that you own. Okay. And there's all these attributes that are used to describe the image. So you'll see when you go into OpenSea, they use this metadata to sort of understand what the piece of content entails, how many attributes it has, its rarity, all that sort of jazz. And that gets built into this metadata. Okay. So the number points to metadata, and in this metadata is a CID to the actual image, which will be this guy. So if you go into the metadata, you go grab that CID, and then you use IPFS's HTTP protocol. There we go. You'll end up seeing that image that is actually stored on IPFS. And that's pretty much how things glue together. You'll also see something very interesting, like these aren't your usual URLs. And it's because they're not, right? This over here is a cryptographic hash of the actual metadata that you own. Okay. And that's very important, because what you really care about owning is the content. Okay, it's not necessarily about the URL, and I'll explain that a little bit later, but it's about the content. So they've got these cryptographic hash functions, and you'll push the digital stuff into this, so the image, and out will spit something like this, and it's unique. So whatever you have, it uniquely represents the data, this hash. And here's a really good example. So what we're normally used to is we're used to URLs over here, right? So I thought initially, okay, cool. I mean, if this is a URL and I store an image on a server, I could easily swap out that image, right? And then that's problematic. So if I owned artwork 1 and somebody decided to, or somebody got into the server and changed out the image, it would say I own this other image, which isn't necessarily true. And how people get around that is by using this hash. Okay, because the hash uniquely represents this image. Okay, and so it can only always ever point to this image, and that's where this content identifier comes in. So we're used to URLs, which shows you the location of where something is. A content identifier actually represents the content that it points to, and that's how it would look something like this. So if somebody changed the image or changed the metadata or changed anything, the actual hash would change itself. And that's how you can also uniquely say, I own this piece of artwork, or I own this metadata, because if you run it through the hash, you'll always get to the same end result. And that's how you know you own it. Because the blockchain is immutable, the moment you save the CID onto the blockchain, it's yours forever, right? Until you trade it or sell it or swap it out. So that's another important piece of content. But I also got to thinking, I mean, if I took the CID and I placed it on a server, if the server disappears or goes away, well, then we're back to square one, So now I can't change the underlying content, but if I change the server or drop the server or something happens with the server, I'll lose that URL or the CID as well. And what you actually end up doing is you put it on this thing called IPFS, the Interplanetary File System, which is a distributed, it's a bunch of distributed computers all over the world. And when you upload it to there, they've got like a bunch of algorithms that determine, how many times this image is replicated across the network, but the image will be replicated across the network. And I'll show you in the following slide. And so if one computer goes down, there's hopefully another computer on the network that holds this image. And so your image will technically live forever on IPFS. So it's not centralized over here. It's decentralized across a bunch of computers across the world. Okay. And this is from one of the providers we use. So we use a provider called NFT Storage. So if you wanted to use IPFS, you've got to download a node. it's quite the rigmarole to try and get stuff up and running. But if you use another provider like IPFS, it really helps. And you can see over here, you know, there's that CID that uniquely represents this piece of data. You see it's pinned. You can also see the storage providers. So you'll see the one underneath. There's actually like 4 storage providers that are actually storing this image all over the place. And at minimum, there's always 2. So you can see that there. The moment it's pinned, it's there living on IPFS. So the probability of it disappearing is possible, but it's extremely unlikely. They don't give any guarantees though, but I mean, from my experience, they've actually been really good at IPFS. So yeah, so in summary, to take this massive, it's not complex around NFTs, but to take something and really dumb it down, it's really just a number that gets stored on a blockchain that points to a certain piece of metadata that lives on IPFS. Nice, simple, just like that. So that's what an NFT really is. A number points to metadata, metadata describes an image, and that stuff, it gets stored in a decentralized file system across the world. And that's an NFT, guys. Cool, the project. Let's talk about the project and what was built. Before we start talking about this project, I'm gonna have to explain a few concepts because it might get, and I'm also a little bit worried about time. So, but let's go through a few concepts before I actually show you stuff. Okay, cool. So you saw earlier when there was this function called save mint. Now, when you save something to the blockchain, you know, you're using a string, okay, and you're putting this number. So you're basically putting this what could be a very long string and this number onto the blockchain. The moment you add anything to the blockchain, you're going to get charged money, and they call this stuff gas. Okay. Now, because of the expenses that it takes to, you know, to run these blockchains, the gas can be quite high. So sometimes you're looking at around 800 Rand to put an image on, or not an image, to put this URL and this number onto the blockchain. So it's quite expensive. If you wanted to mint an NFT and put it on the blockchain. Okay. And so that's minting, right? If a creator, you know, creates a piece of artwork.
Got a hand up here.
Yeah. Is it cool if we field questions later? Is that cool?
No problem.
Okay, cool, brilliant. Joe, sorry, I can't see hands. I'm assuming you guys can see screens. Yeah. Okay, so what would normally happen is a creator would, you know, create a piece of artwork, and if he or she wants to put it onto the blockchain, they would do this minting kind of thing, and it's expensive. So I mean, if you're a creator, you're paying 800 Rand, and maybe somebody buys your artwork, maybe somebody doesn't. So it was a really big barrier to entry for creators, right? What people ended up, all the smart people of the internet ended up creating was this concept called lazy minting. And what we do is we partially mint it. So we'll take the image, we'll put it on an IPFS, we'll get the CID, but the CID gets stored in a database, right? Okay. Now, what we end up doing is on this marketplace, when people go to the marketplace, using some fancy pants encryption, whenever somebody wants to buy this NFT for the first time, using a particular approach, you know, we call this lazy minting approach. I really wanted to go into the encryption of stuff, but there wasn't enough time, unfortunately, or maybe write an article about it and how to do it. But all you need to know is using fancy pants encryption, it would divert the fees. So the moment somebody wanted to buy it, okay, it would take the fees from the creator and put it on the buyer. So if the buyer really wanted this piece of artwork, they would pay the fees. That would put the stuff officially on the blockchain. So for now, it's just sitting on a database. It's all kind of there, except for it being stored onto the blockchain. And the moment somebody wants to buy, the buyer would get charged the fees, which was a big deal for creators. So they wouldn't have to put anything in, I mean, other than their time to make the artwork, and off they go, right? I mean, and the buyer would bear the fees. Cool, and that's lazy minting. So the demo I'm going to show you, I'm going to start off with off-chain stuff. So that's, you know, how to add stuff for sale. So there were NFTs that are already, you know, sitting on IPFS inside of our little website. You know, we're going to update the stuff, delete the stuff. And this is pretty much anything that's off-chain is talking directly to a backend, right? And everything's, you know, vanilla sort of Web2 stuff. From here, I'll show you how to buy the NFT through our marketplace and how MetaMask interacts with the smart contracts and how things move from the backend onto the blockchain. Okay, so once somebody buys something, we listen for events on the blockchain. The moment something is bought, we delete it from our backend, and then it gets officially put into the blockchain. Then after that, we'll talk about on-chain NFT stuff. you know, how to take an NFT that was on sale, or how to take an NFT that is on chain, put it on sale, buy, update, all that sort of jazz. So that's the demo coming up. So yeah, because of the demo gods, I decided not to provoke such things. So I did screen recordings, because yeah, Murphy's Law. Okay, so this is the DVT Marketplace. We're really hoping to get this onto like an Ethereum testnet, but this is how it kind of looks. You'll go. These are the NFTs that are currently on sale. You also see the generative art that we ended up creating. So that's what ends up happening. You kind of take art and you add different things to an image to create, you know, different types of images. So you layer the sorts of stuff, and then you build it like a stack, and then you randomize it, right? So you just say, hey, some of them, 20% of them have caps, you know, 10% of them have red shoes and stuff like that, okay? So that's generative art. I figured we might as well use our DVT little monsters to create this sort of stuff. But this is how it's currently looking. So when you get into the marketplace, the most important thing that you're going to see here, and I'll explain this a little bit later, this is how you would log in, okay? The server would send you a secret message. You would sign the secret message, okay? And then using encryption, I'm able to determine if you are who you say you are. So output spits out your public address. If there's somebody trying to spoof you, it'd be a little bit more difficult because they don't have your private key, right? So the logins here change quite a bit, which is really cool because there's almost no friction. So if you have MetaMask installed already and that's all good to go, you would log in typically with something like this. So you'd log in, I know who you are, and then I'll just send you the good old JWT, and then you can use that token to transact with the backend. Cool. And then from here, we, you know, because I know you are, I can go to your profile and I can go see, you know, what NFTs are you selling. So these are your listings, and this is what we called our listings. From here, we would go to your actual NFTs, and you can see there's like a huge chunk of them. I think we made, I think, over 200 of these, got the computer to generate them. So some of them are like really cool. Some of them are a little bit weird. But that's the glory of randomization. So yeah, it was really cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to take those Microsoft mutants over here. We even like auto-gen the little stories and the descriptions that come with them. And we're going to put this guy on for sale. And we're going to pop it on there for, I think it was 1 Ethereum. And we pop that there to sell. Okay, boom. And then you'll see this is the process of lazy minting, right? So I take this and I ask the person on the front end, hey, with your private key, I need you to sign this so we can assert that it's legit. So when it goes into the blockchain and it follows that sort of process, I'm able to determine who the owner was and assert, you know, that the stuff was signed by the right person. It's not somebody's trying to spoof you. And so you would sign this. Okay, boop. And then you're good to go. And the moment you end up signing that, you'll see it becomes part of your listing. So these are the NFTs that you're currently selling. Okay. And then when you go to explore, you can see it's over there for, it's there for sale. So yeah. We also like added certain, like, you know, the fluffy stuff, like how to update this and all that sort of jazz. Every time you update it, you've got to re-sign it, because, you know, the content has changed. So you'll see that the price there is changed. You know, so somebody couldn't, like, if somebody hacked our database, you know, and try to fiddle with prices, you know, so there's a price on the database, but the signature would then also change. So when we take the signature and we do all the, you know, the decryption on the blockchain, you know, to get the right stuff out, you know, we can assert, you know, that prices are like for like, and we actually use the price that comes out of this. So just to make sure it's all legit. Okay, so off we kind of go there, and you can see that the price has changed, and then we re-sign it. And then Bob C. Uncle, let's just see here. This is just deleting the listings. If you wanted to delete it, you could, and then that just goes to the database and does a normal delete. Really nothing too fancy over here. Okay, in the next bit over here, we're actually going to go buy the NFT. So I put the NFT back on for sale. You'll see the address here, 6EBC. So what we're going to do now is we're going to change accounts. So that's 6EBC. And then what we'll do is we'll change to account 6. Okay, a little bit. Okay, and there we go. And then now the moment you change the account, it prompts you to log in with this account. you can log in, and then this person is successfully logged in, and you can see that the address over there has changed. Okay, so now I'm logged in as a different person. When I want to buy this, it's real simple. There we go. There's there to ETH. It's interacting with the blockchain. And then we'll just say confirm, and boom, easy peasy. We've just bought an NFT. Okay, and what's actually happened here is we've taken an off-chain NFT, which is sitting on our back ends, and we've just actually put it onto the blockchain for the very first time. And now this person owns that NFT, right? So if we go to the profile, it's not a listing, but you can see that it is an actual NFT. So you can see over there, we now own this guy. Okay, our little Microsoft mutant. Okay. And then I can use all this account as like a ton of other NFTs. So this is obviously a very passionate collector. But now I want to add this for sale onto the blockchain. Okay, so I've gone from off-chain, I've put it on-chain, and now I want to sell it for more money. So I bought it for like around 2 Ethereum. I want to sell it for 4 Ethereum. And now what ends up happening is now we're talking to a smart contract that's sitting on the blockchain, a marketplace smart contract. So whenever you add anything to the blockchain, you're going to get charged gas fees, right? So you'll see over here, you'll see over there, the moment you're interacting and you say, hey, I want to sell this sorts of thing, Ethereum's going to charge you gas fees. Ironically, when I was making these videos, the beauty of hindsight, we could probably circumvent all these sorts of things and stop fees from happening in its entirety. That's probably like a marketplace version 2. But for now, in this particular implementation, every time you want to take an on-chain NFT and sell it or update it or do anything, you're going to get charged fees to do this by Ethereum, because you're changing state on the blockchain. And then boom, Bob sees uncle. So there we go, got a little NFT there to be sold. So if we go over here, you can see over there inside of Explore, it's got all of that there. And then this is my profile. If I wanted to update this to 8 Ethereum, that's not a problem. I'll just say update. And then, MetaMask kicks in, and then you'll see that, the larger, you'll see that the fees increase there a little bit. So yeah, that's just, updating stuff on the actual blockchain. Every time you interact with the blockchain, you do get charged. But let's see, maybe in version 2, we can get around it. Okay, cool. Now this is buying an on-chain NFT. So this is buying an NFT that's already on the blockchain. And guess what? It's really similar to buying something that is off-chain. So here I swap the accounts out. You'll see the buyer sitting at 999 Ethereum. This guy signs in. So now the account has changed for this particular person. So you'll see that the address has changed. And when he wants to buy it, this pops up. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. And then you just say confirm, and there we go. You just this person has bought an NFT for 8 Ethereum. Okay. What's also really cool about this, you can see the money move. So you'll see that I went from 999 down to 991, and then you'll see the person I bought it from, they've gone up to 1005. Okay, because I think it was at 997. So you can see what's really nice about this is how easy it is to move value and money around. And I'll talk about that in the insights going, in the subsequent sections. But yeah, that's you buying an on-chain NFT, and then yeah, we pretty much just built like a micro OpenSea, like a really baby version of OpenSea. If I go to my NFTs, you can see that there we go. It's sitting in my list of NFTs. There's some nice test data for you guys. But yeah, and that's pretty much what we ended up building. It was like a little baby marketplace just to buy and sell NFTs, and then just to understand how a Web3 project would glue together. Okay, so back to the presentation. Some good old-fashioned insights. So let's kick that off. The things that Google won't tell you. Well, they'll kind of partially tell you. The first thing I find myself doing when I got to this project is, how do we architect this? So we go to Google and we go search, and obviously the hype buzzword is decentralized. Everything's decentralized. And I was like, well, I mean, I understand the issues with centralization, but there's also some really good upsides to things being centralized. It's not evil, as blockchain would lead you to believe, right? So I'm still very skeptical about this whole decentralized thing. Okay. And if you go into the internet, they'll show you all these sorts of pictures. So this is what we're used to, on the left. We're used to a Web2, there's a front end, there's a back end, there's a database, and this is how we build stuff. And then in the Web3 world, there's no backends. Okay, you talk directly to Ethereum, which is a bit weird, So I sat worrying about like my mobile apps, my websites, they all kind of like duplicate this logic inside of them, and they all talk directly to this, to Ethereum. I was a little bit skeptical around that. And so the more I researched, and it took a surprisingly long time to kind of wrap my head around this, because everybody was punting. You just take your front end, you use this JavaScript library, and you talk directly to Ethereum. And turns out they lied. Well, they didn't lie, but they didn't really articulate what should be said when architecting a Web3 project. And for me, what's important for everybody on this call to know, so the first most important insights about architecting a Web3 project, it's about the private key. Where does this private key sit? The private key is king. And there's some pros and cons with each approach. So what you saw earlier with the marketplace, we used a website, a wallet like MetaMask, and the private key actually sits on the front end. No, there are no private keys sitting on the, because in a wallet, there's a private key and the public key, and everybody knows your public key, but this private key needs to be secret, because if somebody gets hold of your private key, they can do whatever they want, right? And so there's two options, really. The one is the wallet option, which you saw earlier, so there are no private keys stored on the server, okay? And then the other option is, guess what? You can actually put private keys on a server, right? There's pros and cons to each of these. So if the private key does sit in the browser and not on the server, it's obviously pretty good for security, right? There isn't this massive centralized place where, if somebody did end up hacking backends, they get all these private keys and they can do whatever they want with it, okay? So that's the first thing, until maybe there's some vulnerability found in MetaMask. For now, using a wallet on the front end is actually pretty good for security. The downside to that, and using something like MetaMask, as you'll see in other insights, it's a double-edged sword. So the friction it takes to get MetaMask set up, funded, you can imagine the user journey. I take my Standard Bank, I go to Luno, I buy crypto stuff there. I've then got to go and install the extension. I've got to, put all the stuff in there. There really is a lot of onboarding. So you can imagine if you're like some startup, a Web3 startup, and you're adding all this friction, beforehand, it could get really tricky for adoption, right? So the user experience there isn't particularly great initially. Once somebody does have MetaMask on, then there actually are some pretty cool upsides to taking this whole wallet approach. Obviously, on the server side, it's not so great having all these private keys everywhere, because you probably won't sleep at night and you worry about getting hacked. And there's a lot of incentive to hack you because you've got all these sorts of keys. And so it does get a little bit iffy there. The other side of that is that there's the usual user experience, and maybe the current user experience isn't the best, but it's what people know. And so the change management around it will be very low. People will just be like the stock standard, log in with my email, my password, and I can do whatever I want, right? So there's pros and cons, and this is a business discussion, right? It's not necessarily talk directly to the blockchain. It's more around, having an overview of how this should be done, okay? The second insight was that you don't actually need logins. And there's goods and bads to this sorts of things. So there's no more need for passwords. There's no more need for forgot passwords, multi-factor authentication, no more verification of email addresses. So, if you're registering for the first time, you saw in the whole marketplace, there was no need to do this whole verification process. Using encryption, I say, hey, here's a secret message. You say, hey, I'm George. And I say, okay, cool, we'll prove it. I send you a message, you encrypt it, you send it back to me. And then using some really cool encryption, I can actually verify that you are who you say you are. And that's actually pretty cool. So this whole registration and login process is really streamlined when it's up and running. You saw how simple it was. You literally press the sign button and you're good to go. So that's actually really cool. From a UX perspective, having something this simple is actually really nice going forward. And this is something that seems fairly obvious, but just actually needs to be spoken about. Like, payments are ridiculously seamless, like really, really seamless. And moving money around it's difficult, it's slow. There's OTPs, there's all these different verification steps. If you want to pay someone, you need account numbers and all this sort of jazz. Depending on the type of payment you made, there's sometimes long clearance times. So you've also seen that stuff on your credit cards where, like, they've reserved money, the merchants reserved money, but they haven't taken the money and all this other sorts of stuff over here on the blockchain. And as much as people might hate on blockchain, you just can't beat it when making payments. It's really, really good. The only downside to making payments on the blockchain is people pay the gas fees, you know, to do this sorts of stuff. But I mean, other than that, as consumers, we aren't used to that. It's normally businesses who pay the fees to MasterCard and Visa and all that jazz. Here it's just a little bit inverted. But to move that much money that quickly around within a couple of seconds is actually a really big deal. There's also, like, if you wanted to make an offshore payment, you know, and there's normally fraud stops on your credit cards. Now, okay, maybe for good or for bad, there's no fraud stops. It can just go. But yeah, making payments is just like really, really stupidly simple with a really small amount of lines of code, I might add. The next biggest thing that is also like really understated with things being decentralized. See the magic word, that should have been a drinking game. Every time I say decentralized, you guys pop the shot. But it's about interoperability, right? So what we used to something like this. Each little company has their server with their code in there, with their content on there, you know, the books, the game items, all the sorts of stuff, whatever other sort of things. And to get these systems to talk to each other is actually a little bit of a nightmare. It's actually really, really difficult. You know, people are going to need API keys. You're going to need certain, you know, and then you can imagine the security around it, the documentation around it, the team that's got to go troubleshoot when people can't log in and endpoints aren't working and all that sort of jazz. What the blockchain really does is it takes a lot of the stuff that's sitting in these layers and moves it down, okay? So your smart contracts, the code that governs certain logic, can get pushed onto the blockchain and it can't be changed. It'll run like that forever. Okay, all your certain items move off of backends and move into things like IPFS, you know, and you can get this nice interoperability. So, I mean, if I've got a particular game item that I bought in game A and that's stored on the blockchain, you know, game B can go talk to the smart contract that governs the movement of all those items, and it's good to go. You know, security is built in. This is what this also does from a business perspective. So there's other blockchains, private blockchains called, like, you know, through, you know, projects called Hyperledger Fabric, which the biggest deal around this is just interoperability. So when different companies want to collaborate and work with each other, you can imagine the mess that ensues with that. You know, if we had to get all these guys to talk to each other in a safe and secure way where everybody like might have incentive to do the other person in, you know, interoperability in a Web2 world is actually really difficult to pull this off. It's an expensive task. Now with the blockchain and security built in, it's a heck of a lot easier to collaborate and to do stuff. And so you'll find all this stuff that used to sit in these silos and in these layers being pushed down and abstracted into this, like, you know, into this blockchain sort of layer, which is also a pretty big deal. I think that's sometimes really overlooked. So yeah, I mean, your smart contracts are almost like autonomous micro APIs, if so to say. You know, you call methods on a smart contract and it does things. You don't need API keys because security is already built into the system. So there's no, you know, weird song and dance with API keys. It's cheaper collaboration. I mean, as I mentioned before, if you wanted like a whole bunch of companies to work together and collaborate in a safe and secure way, the teams that you'd have to put together just to get those layers, it'll be a really expensive exercise. Now, the blockchain just kind of does everything, okay, for you, which is really cool for that. And then the nice thing about that for businesses, not for us, is that like users will pay the fees, not companies. So some companies are really excited about not paying for servers as much, you know, because it's all sitting on a blockchain. And if we wanted to move and transact with blockchains, we'd ultimately end up paying, which isn't ideal, but we'll get there. Okay, cool. The other thing it did do is prove authenticity. And love it or hate it, but people have spent a lot of money on very strange things. So I think this is like one of the highest selling NFTs, sold for like 60 million Rand. For some strange reason, somebody out there wanted to own this piece of artwork. And because of the properties that the blockchain has, you know, and there's this contract that can't change, and this contract says, hey man, this address owns this token, and this token points to this piece of artwork. To do that before without the blockchain was a little bit difficult, you know. I mean, how do we know somebody owns the artwork? Who keeps a trail of all the stuff? What happens if somebody's, you know, centralized server gets hacked? And so to really proving somebody owned an image was actually quite difficult to pull off before, and that's why I didn't pick up. But for strange reasons, I Googled, people like to collect stuff and spend a lot of money on stuff. And so that's why there's been a lot of hype around NFTs, okay, and people spending money on these sorts of things. And before everybody hates on blockchain pictures, just saying this was an artwork, okay, somebody spent 185 million. I think this was actually dollars. I got this wrong, sorry. Okay, and it's the world's most expensive canvas. So I can't tell you why people want to do these sorts of exercises, but as technologists, we just need to allow them to do it and hopefully profit off of the back of that. So yeah, the blockchain allows for this authenticity and this trail of transactions that shows ownership along the way, which for art in the art world is a pretty big deal. So like it or hate it, it is something that the blockchain did solve, and hence the boom for companies like OpenSea. Now, I think the best point I'd like to chat about is adoption issues and friction. So a large bulk of my job is figuring out what's this mean for adoption, right? And I'm going to play a nice little example. When we were before credit cards and people used to go to bank branches on Saturdays to lift up money and then to go live their lives. That's how people used to live. Okay, and then the credit card came along and plastic cards came along. And so moving from this cash-based world on the left side to this digital world on the right side was actually really, really easy. You went to your bank, they gave you a card, and all you had to do was remember a PIN, and you were good to go. So moving from this cash-based world to this electronic world, there was very little friction involved. Okay, and that's a big deal. So whenever you want to change something really big like payments, for example, and how people do things, universally, you really, really have to remove as much friction as possible from the process. Okay. In the credit card space, and even now, it's like, I don't know how many years later after credit cards started to become a thing, there's still some people who aren't banked. So it shows you how long adoption takes, okay? But appreciate how simple it was, okay, to move from a cash-based world into a digital sort of world, right? It wasn't an easy task for banks and businesses, but from a consumer perspective, there's very little friction, okay? You just got your plastic card and you were good to go. And that's a very big deal, okay? On the blockchain side, yeah, I mean, even I must admit, you can make payments really quickly and you can do all these things really quickly, but I don't know if blockchain technologies solve the problems that much more better for people to be like, oh, wow, this is a no-brainer, let's use this technology. With credit cards, going to a branch on a Saturday and sitting in queues to go get your money, that's a heck of a big problem. Being able to swipe, and I think we take it for granted now, being able to swipe stuff easy peasy with something as simple as a plastic card is a really big deal, okay? Over here, it's a little bit different. Like payments aren't great, or they're not perfect, but they're not bad. The other issue is this whole integration between these two worlds. So to go from the world we kind of live in this digital world through to blockchain sort of stuff, it's a bit tricky. So firstly, the issue is wallets and getting money onto wallets. There's a heck of a lot of friction in that. Once you do get onto that, the other issue is the actual cryptocurrencies. So cryptocurrencies, they're like yo-yos. It's the Ethereum you have is worth 10 grand today, it's worth 5 grand tomorrow. It yo-yos a little bit too much. It's not a currency technically by definition. It's more of like a store of value. And so before this thing really starts to pick up adoption, and you can see, crypto markets slump and all of a sudden OpenSea goes dead. So before, things, crypto really starts popping up and gaining traction amongst people, I'd say the industry needs to figure out this whole mask thing, this MetaMask thing and these wallets thing, and the whole actual underlying currency that we use. People want to pay in rands, not ETHs. So yeah, ironically, the thing that made cryptocurrencies really popular is also like its Achilles heel. So, because cryptocurrency was meant to be decentralized and, get rid of banks and all that sort of jazz. If they had actually worked with banks and gotten involved in that, it probably would have been a very different discussion using that technology. So for good or for worse, yeah, here we are. So yeah, I think there are some adoption issues and a lot of friction on the crypto side before it really starts to become mainstream, like credit cards and all that sort of jazz. So yeah, I have some shout outs to say, because for me it's really important to acknowledge the people who are on the journey, and so they really are the MVPs. And the first set of shout outs goes out to Jabu and Megan. They got some really artistic pencil drawings from me. The pencil drawings are very impressive. Sadly, the front end devs can't work with pencil drawings, turns out. And so the girls really came together. They put together the website. So everything you see there was done by them. Also did the sorts of minions that came together. They created different profiles and personas, and there's the pimping design devil and the professional design devil, and they came up with all the artwork and all that sort of jazz. So yeah, I'm extremely grateful for them. It would have looked really odd and weird if I was doing all the designs. So I'm thankful for their work and effort that they put into the project. So yeah, cheers, thanks guys. The other peeps I've got to talk about is Ashley, Putti, and Minoto. I don't come from a web background, and so to slap something, I could slap a really bad React app really quickly together, but to really put something nice together in a slick that you saw in those demos did become a bit of a pain. Yeah, React was a weird beast, and so by fate, as fate would have it, these three were there to help me out and put things together and get the ball rolling and all that sort of jazz. So yeah, cheers, thanks guys. Yeah, getting the website together was, yeah, and I'm just saying, working with Web3 technologies, it's buggy, it throws funny errors, it's not sexy like your IDE, where it's going to tell you it breaks on this line, and for this reason, it just breaks, and we don't know why. So there were some hours where it did get frustrating, working with and interacting with blockchains and all that sort of jazz. And so you see how smooth and slick it was on the project. It wasn't like that during dev. So cheers to these three, because they really that's a mission through some difficult moments. And finally, the real champion for this project was David. David is a Golang dev in Kenya, and he joined the project, I think, like in July. And shame, I mean, not many people have knowledge on Web3 stuff, and he came on board. He did the hard work. He got together, our environments, because I was just deving by myself. He got in, the AWS environments up and running. He got the blockchains on the boxes up and running, the security around that. He looked after the back end, made sure everything was there. If there were any issues with smart contracts, he would deploy them. He'd help the front end team debug them. So he really is the hero of this whole thing. Yeah, I'm extremely grateful for David's help through this whole journey. So yeah, cheers, Dave. Thanks for the help. I really appreciate it. And then yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Some thoughts, some questions. I saw there were hands and all that sort of jazz. Now is that time. Hit me. Okay, I see a hand. Collins, go for it, man.
Hi, Roberto. Amazing presentation. Very well educated. I'm just wondering, do you think NFTs are dead? Because there was a whole hullabaloo before, and right now there's pretty much nothing going on for NFTs right now. What do you think?
So it's a good question, and I think we need to. I think the biggest issue that plagues technology is the hype that comes with it. So like even the internet, there was literally a .com, like the bubble burst, right? It didn't mean that the internet was dead, much from it. So it's a lot of the stuff, there's a lot of hype train. There are a lot of people trying to profit off of it and to drive the hype train because they profit, right? So I wouldn't say that they're completely dead and down and out. When people say they're dead, I think a lot of us is trying to get the clicks and the hysteria around that. I think in this day and age, you've got to be very careful about all that stuff. So I wouldn't say that they did. It has slowed down, obviously, just because there aren't these crazy margins to be made in the artwork and all that sort of jazz. But if anything, it really is. I mean, I know like FIFA's now released a whole bunch of collectibles in the build up to the World Cup. And you can go buy like, different videos of Ronaldo scoring goals and all these other, different stuff. So I wouldn't say it's dead. It's just not getting the hype that it used to get. So most people are like, oh, it's dead. So I wouldn't rule it out just yet. Dead is when I can't, like, companies are going bust and it's not there. And even then, back in the day, at the beginning of the internet, some companies did go bust and still were able to, get the internet didn't die, so I wouldn't say it's dead per se. I think if you're a creator, you probably won't make as much money as you were before. And that's talking to like the very like niche group of creators who do actually make it, but I wouldn't say it's dead, no.
Yeah, that's true. It's not dead, but it's going there because in terms of infrastructure, yes, I buy something for a lot of money, millions of money, of shilling, of rands or dollars, but no one can see that this is mine. It's not like a car. Like I have a nice car, buy an expensive car, and everybody can see my car. but then I'm buying something, but the infrastructure is not there for everybody to see that I have bought it. So I think in that regard, it's the value really goes down.
Ooh. I'm like really excited that you mentioned that. So it depends. I know Instagram is hooking NFTs into Instagram, and it's a very like well said point around, it not being as visible, because as humans we are visible. You want people to know that you have this item and all that sort of jazz, and an item being physical, you can obviously see it. But I think the more social media companies start to play in that sort of space, and if I go into your Instagram profile and I see you own this NFT and that's how much you paid for it, I think it might change the discussion. So it's still very early days. There was a lot of hype, with OpenSea, but I think the more the stuff starts to get integrated into the social media aspects, I also think more companies, like I know in the luxury goods market, they're tying NFTs to physical items, okay, using certain tags and all that sort of jazz. So the technology is fine. The hype is kind of gone, but I think the more these companies start adopting it and really like wrapping their heads around it to see how you can get value from blockchain, I think it might change. I don't think it'll be like next year or that soon, but it'll definitely have a bit of a turnaround. So yeah, let's see. I think if anything, I always advise with this is approach it with like an optimistic skepticism, so always see like, how the technology can be used from a business aspect. Don't get sucked in too much in the hype. So for example, with the NFTs, there's like a really big drive to tap into secondhand markets. So if I can swap my token, every time I swap this token, I get a royalty back, or I can make a cost out of that. So there's like, I think the textbook market is looking to do that because the secondhand textbook market is huge. So when you look at these sorts of things, don't look at it from a high perspective. Look at it from like a business perspective and how you can profit. But yeah, it's well said. Yeah. Sorry, I'm talking about. Any other questions? Yeah, go for it.
Sorry, my question is just around the value and like how does the NFT gain value? What I heard was that, so let's say for instance you buy an NFT for 1 Ethereum, then it can't be sold for less when it sells again.
Okay. So, good question on value. I think as with anything, it's all about supply and demand, right? So if I buy, so you wouldn't want to sell it for less because you'd make a loss, right? So unless you want to get the money out of this NFT, you can sell it at a loss, so it's almost like a house. Let's take a house. You can buy a house for say R1 million. You can sell it for $500,000 if you really wanted to. You just lose the value in the $500,000. So that's why you don't sell it less. You don't want to lose money. With the value and why the value increases, it's all about good old supply and demand. So if I have one house and I want to put it on for sale and I've got like 10 people, who want to buy it and they start bidding against each other to buy this house for whichever other reason, you'll see that value goes up. So it's good old fashioned supply and demand economics sort of stuff. Why the humans want to buy and own that sort of art piece, I can't tell you. It's very peculiar. But humans do this. Like people have been collecting stamps. I don't know why people want stamps, but they want them. And so the same mystical force that people use to collect things, like stamps and cards and whatever else, that same mystical force has now moved over to NFT. So people want to own digital images, man, and they want to own them real bad. So yeah, hence the boom. But yeah, that's what I'd say. It's all about supply and demand for a particular NFT.
Yeah, and then there's the downside of it. I saw an article the other day where someone's posted actually and said that they bought an NFT for like $500,000, but now the collection lost its value completely. Now it's worth nothing. How does a collection lose its value?
That's a good question. I'd be curious to inspect and understand that article and why it went down to zero. As with anything that holds value, like a stock price, or let's take stocks, like a good old shares. I think it's a lot of like people get scared, you know, and people ride the emotion roller coaster. So when you see everybody selling stuff, people get jittery and they start selling and selling and selling. So like, let's take COVID. COVID happens. There was like a massive stock market sell-off because people thought there were going to be massive losses. And people, I mean, like no financial statements had been released, you know, so we don't know, you know, it was thoughts of there might be losses, right? But people just sold stuff and people just like get so scared to a point that they sell everything and they think, okay, it's going down, let's sell everything. And sometimes that could happen where you reach complete zero, you know, and that has happened. I know it's like there was some certain, you know, crypto coins where that did happen. So yeah, once again, the humans, they get in there and they start doing funny things. So if there's like fear and massive sell-offs, that could happen. What you also learn about humans is as the things go down, somebody's saying, I can profit from this. Okay, let's buy the dip. So it might go to zero, but there could be somebody who says, hey, let's buy it when it's really low, because if it goes up, I'll make some really good margins. So it's that whole supply demand stuff. It's the whole emotional aspect.
It might be a strategy.
It could be
to get everyone to drop the collection so one person can buy it. Yeah,
there we go.
I get what you're saying.
And there's some rich guy in Malibu with, I don't know, 10,000 odd pieces. I don't know. So it's well said. There are some peculiar things, but yeah, that's good old fear probably led to that massive sell-off. Yeah. And but that could happen with anything technically.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks. That's it for me.
Cool. Any other questions from anybody else? Cool. Zenas, hit me.
So how would you use this technology in anything else except for what you've shown us? For example, you said some client or one of our clients approach us based on this. How would you see this spreading in the real world other than selling artwork and images and stuff like that?
Okay, cool. I mean, great question, right? So I can see it working a lot in the luxury goods market because there's counterfeits, right? So and that's like I think they lose like $4 billion a year on counterfeit Gucci bags and all of that jazz. So I think within luxury goods, if it's something I must admit, I don't think where this technology is today, much like the internet was at the beginning of the day, you know, there are like a bajillion amounts of use cases, because if there was, there'd be a lot of rich people doing startups, right? so that's the number one. But I mean, I can definitely speak to things like luxury goods, proving that you own something, proving that something isn't counterfeit is a big deal. That might curb theft. Being able to track these sorts of assets would do really well for insurance. So I mean, insurance companies lose huge amounts of money on people lying, you know, saying, oh, this piece of artwork is worth, you know, 10 million rand. Somebody came into my house and stole it. You've got to pay me out. They can say, you know, so it might even lower premiums, you know, because it'll, you know, not incentivize people to lie about stuff. So it'll help, you know, wherever counterfeiting is rife. Luxury goods is one of those markets. It would help from an insurance sort of perspective. So having that trail of stuff is a big deal for insurance companies, and knowing that like amounts and money is legit. Yeah, so I mean, those are some of the places I know with like textbooks. So Pearson, they're piloting NFTs now because they found that whenever you buy a textbook, it gets sold 7 times onwards, right? And so what they're trying to do now is they're trying to like make NFTs of textbooks, and every time somebody sells a textbook, you can, you know, they can get those royalties, those margins off of it. So I mean, from a publishing perspective, it's becoming a big deal. And that'll also stop counterfeits, you know. So for example, if you're selling comic books, you know, so if Marvel moves into a digital sort of space and they want to start trading this sort of stuff, it could work there. So there's a lot of use cases. I know from a private blockchain perspective, it's used a lot in supply chains. So remember earlier when I spoke of interoperability, getting that sort of interoperability and getting all these people on board is really difficult and expensive. Blockchain fixes that a lot. So you find people with supply chain processes and how complicated that gets. That's definitely helping a lot there. But sure, I think it's very early days for the technology. I think there's a whole bunch of different use cases that might exist, but we won't know until we try. So I think there's going to be a lot of like, much like the internet in the beginning of the days, there's a lot of this trial and error, and not just trial and error, but market timing. So like silly things, like there was a YouTube before YouTube, but it failed for very small but important reasons. So I think, you know, as things evolve, as gas fees get cheaper because there's improvements on this and that, I think there'll be more and more use cases cropping up. But yeah, I mean, anything that involves counterfeiting and secondhand markets is really starting to pick up a bit of steam in that sort of regard. But yeah, we'll see. I think for us as a business and as a company, it's just important to know how it's glued together. I don't think we need to worry too much about the mechanics of how people profit on it. It's really good to know, but if somebody comes to us and says, hey, like one of our clients, they wanted to play in the NFT space clean. And I think at the beginning of the year when I started the role, and if there could have been a different discussion if we knew how it all glued together, to be candid with you. So they're going to guys like Dapper Labs to go build themselves out an NFT marketplace, most likely. And those guys are probably going to charge them stupid money. And for,
sorry
yeah.
to interrupt. We've only got a minute left, so
Oh,
just be
sorry.
aware of that. I don't know if we're supposed to carry on. I'd love to carry on. I'm enjoying this.
I'm happy to carry on. So if like guys and girls want to drop off, like go for it. Okay, sorry, but Gerald, yeah, I'll be talking
No
too
worries,
much.
no worries. And then maybe just to come back to Reinhard, ever get to ask his question?
No, he did, yeah. You did,
okay,
yeah.
cool.
Yeah. Okay, Byron. Oh boy, hit me, Byron.
Hi, sorry, I had to pop in and out. I had a client call me randomly throughout. So I don't know if this question was answered. But
Okay.
what do you have to say about the camp members that just the right-click save for images? I mean, what's the difference between owning a virtual piece of data?
So like, look, man, great question. And it's like easily circumventable and people laugh about it, right? Like you literally, I saw some people saying, I own this image, and people on Twitter like update their picture. Like nothing stops you from doing that. It's the same reason nobody stops you from like replicating an artwork. And, you know, I mean, I'm fairly certain in this day and age, you can go hang up the Mona Lisa in your house and say, look, that's the Mona Lisa. And it sounds silly, but everybody will know that that's not the case, right? I'm taking the Mona Lisa as an exaggeration, obviously. But anything could have been counterfeited and duplicated. So, but having that blockchain, having the ability on the blockchain to say, I am sole owner of this very expensive NFT, that's what really matters. It sounds silly, 100%. But yeah, I mean, and then in this day and age, you can literally right-click, download the image, and you're good to go. But you'll never be the owner. And for some people out there, having the ability to say that they are the owner is a really big deal for them. So here we are. Like I said, as technologists, it's not for us to judge them and to say, well, hello, I could just do this. It's to say, yes, man, use it. So yeah, that's pretty much what I have to say around that, because I also found myself asking those questions. Yeah.
Cool.
Cool.
I like the answer.
Okay, William, hit me.
Yeah, so you mentioned the private blockchains, and I see this image that Quiver's put up there with the Gartner hype cycle. Do you think that the private blockchains would actually be more the future of blockchain than just plain decentralization?
Ooh. My answer to that would be yes. I'll be candid. I mean, I look onto the public stuff just because it generally gets more traction. I haven't like gone into deep depths into Hyperledger Fabric. So for all those who want to know, there's your public blockchains that the hype train is all on, and then there's your private blockchains, which is run by like projects like Hyperledger Fabric. So I think within companies, there'll be a lot of good use cases that come out of that. So it's something we still need to investigate, because that's important. Because I think, like, I mean, there's even certain companies like, I think Standard Bank are sniffing around, Hyperledger Fabric. There's also other like public blockchains that aren't as well known, like Hydra or Hedra. They also using them. So it's worth investigating for sure and understanding the problems that it would solve. For companies. With that said, just to add to that, there's also like hybrid things that help be both private and public. So there's certain technologies like the Hyperledger Besu project that helps you fiddle with both and move between the two worlds. So I 100% agree. For us, it's about, I've got to go fiddle with the technology and say, yeah, this is how we glue it together. This is why these are the stories. So when a client does come along, we're like, hey man, we're best positioned to sort it out. So I agree with you. I think the private blockchains might pick up steam, but I think they'll pick up steam for different reasons. Yeah, and they are around. We just have to Google a little bit more on the private blockchain. So I know some of the banks in the UK are using it for certain, like moving around of assets and all that sort of jazz. So yeah, I think it's worth looking into for sure. Yeah. Cool. Anybody else? Nice and quiet. Okay, cool. Karen, I think that's pretty much it from my side. Also, like, guys, also feel free, message me, reach out on Slack. Happy to answer your questions. Yeah, and we just take it from there. I'm also, I mean, the team is going to try and get it onto a test net, because we're not putting that on Ethereum. But we are going to try to put it on a test net, and then post it somewhere, and then you guys can go fiddle with it and find bugs and all that sort of jazz on the marketplace. But yeah, that's pretty much NFTs in a nutshell. Happiness.
Thanks.
Cool. Okay, everybody.
you.
Well, yeah, thanks for joining. Thanks for listening to everything, and enjoy your evenings.
Thanks,
Thanks,
man.
guys.
Thanks very much.
Cheers, everybody.
Thanks,
100%.
Rob.
Bye.